Hello, dreamers, believers, and bucket list retreaters. Welcome back to Bucket List Retreats, the podcast. I'm your hostess, Kelly Morgan Murley, and we are so excited today to welcome friend of the podcast, Karen Talavera, the accidental seeker. Karen, welcome.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much for having me back. I just love spending time with you and love the pod.
And we love having you on. And we had such a great discussion last time about sacred medicines. And we thought we would just start there, you guys. There has been some really radical changes and developments that have come to light. We thought we would skim onto some of that before we get into our big topic of solo retreating. So, Karen, you have a little bit of your finger on the pulse. What have you seen with this new legislation and what's going on lately with sacred medicines and psychedelics?
Yeah, so sacred and psychedelic plant medicines continue to accelerate into the mainstream. This is a super exciting time to be involved in the space, curious about the space, or following the space. But the latest big news and announcement was that President Trump signed an executive order directing the FDA, the DEA, and even the Veterans Administrative or the VA, Veterans Administration, to accelerate research and access to psychedelic drugs, including psilocybin, MDMA, ibogaine, which for those who haven't heard of that one, a lot of people are like, what's that? Coming out of
Yeah.
left field. That's from South Africa. To treat serious mental health conditions and PTSD. So this is pretty huge because, most people would consider our current political administration to be very conservative, and
Right.
that usually doesn't jibe with acceptance of psychedelics. But this could
Exactly.
be, a turning of the tide.
That's exactly what I think everyone
Yeah.
is wondering, what that administration is thinking. It doesn't seem like anything they would have pulled out of their back pocket. So it's really such great news, but it has to be. I think they were mentioning it was something to do with the military and how much these
Mm.
studies are helping the military. So if it is, that's just fantastic. Whatever it takes, because there's so many wonderful reasons. Uh, it's just a gamut of reasons to make these treatments available to the
Oh, no
general
question.
public.
Yeah, Veterans Affairs. Our veterans are really suffering. And I'm so happy to see this development because it was just not even 2 full years ago that the FDA rejected MDMA assisted PTSD therapy, which is really a shame because
It
almost
really is.
everybody, like in the psychedelic science community, the heavy hitters, the researchers really, really thought that it would come off of being, Schedule 1 or 2 or wherever it's classified and be legalized. So hopefully that's going to be a little closer to happening because it's been through multiple trials. But like I said, it's still kind of the Wild West. Psychedelics is largely unregulated as an arena, but more and more licensed clinical practitioners are being certified and being trained in working with psychedelics. And these are, medical doctors, psychotherapists, mental health professionals, people who, have to have a state license to practice. They don't want to lose it. They don't
No,
want to screw
no.
up. They don't want to
Right.
lose their license or put anyone in jeopardy. So that's a really great sign.
It
But we
is. And
did, yeah, go ahead.
that's who you could look
Uh-huh.
for if you're interested in this.
I believe it's running every other year at this
Mhm,
point. I
mhm.
attended in 2023. They're keeping it in Denver, which is kind of my home territory, which is cool. I did not attend it last year, but it's still back in Denver next year, 2027, and registration is open. So I'm sure, you could put a link in the show notes if people
You
want to
bet.
check that out.
I
But
will.
yeah, that's a great event. And then there's so many resources about plant medicine and psychedelic retreats, which we touched on last
Right.
time.
Yes.
And those are
And
all over the world.
they are.
Uh-huh.
I went to the retreat in the Dominican Republic last December to check it
Yeah.
out and did a psilocybin ceremony, which
Hmm.
worked out fantastic for me. And then we are going to host our own retreat in January of 2027 and make that an offering for those who are interested in looking into it. And one of the gals that is doing the retreat with me, she is working with a veterans group. They are taking
Mm,
a whole retreat filled with veterans down to the Dominican Republic for their own type of uh, retreat and ceremony. And I just am so excited to think that there's
mhm.
those type of retreats out in the world. And I can't wait to talk more about those or learn more about those and get the
Yeah.
word out and let people know
Mhm.
that this is something that they can use to their benefit, especially if they have the needs from being in the military.
Yeah, and, we've talked about a lot of retreats and retreat centers being outside the US, but there are some within the US.
Yes.
And as far as legal developments, Oregon and Colorado are 2 of our states out of a whole 50, right? Hopefully, we're gonna get more,
Yes.
that are really laying the template for working with psychedelics, legalizing and decriminalizing them, and that's been the case in Colorado for 4 years, coming up on 4 years.
Mm.
In Oregon, I think for much longer. So, while there are retreat centers in other states working with psychedelics that may or may not widely advertise, I would say, reach out to for any of your listeners, reach out to us, reach out to me if you're having trouble finding a place. Or I will highly recommend a source called The Third Wave, which is a psychedelic education and coaching certification business. They've got a lot of great resources on their site for retreats. They vet these places as well as the providers, whether they're domestic or international.
Right. Yes. And I know I've
Yeah,
ran across a couple on TikTok. You and I were talking about TikTok a
sure.
minute ago. And these places work really hard on vetting themselves and letting you
Hmm.
know all of the knowledge that they have that they're throwing into this so that you know exactly what you're looking into. I was talking to a gal at a luncheon the other day. Her and her husband offer ayahuasca ceremonies. He is a registered as a pastor within the state, and that's how they are allowed
Mm-hmm.
to offer the ayahuasca. So I haven't looked into I haven't done my own due diligence to see if that's really the case. But because I was curious, I'm like, I asked them, how are you able to do this legally? And that's what she said. So I haven't myself haven't looked into it, but that's what she was saying.
Well, I wonder if they're part of the one entity I know that can legally serve ayahuasca within the US is literally, organized as and under the name the Church of Ayahuasca.
Ah,
So they
okay.
are registered entity or religion or, how they've gone about this legally, I don't know the ins and outs of, but they are definitely not going to fall under risk of like federal prosecution or anything like that.
Right, exactly.
So
So
there
it's
are, there is at least one institution. Yeah.
right, and you just want to make sure that you're going with someone that has a reputation that you can check
Mhm.
out and they've been around a while, eh,
Yeah.
and then and the more questions you ask, the more you'll figure out quite quickly, I would think, if this is a group you want anything to do with or not.
Right. And please,
Yeah.
please always do your homework,
Yes.
especially if you're considering a one-on-one session, because there are a lot of rogue shamans out there, people purporting to be shamans, again, untrained, uncertified, self sort of educating and self-promoting. It pays to go with a vetted, known quality or a licensed practitioner of mental and physical health who has then subsequently been trained or certified in some way to work with psychedelics.
And to lead you down, through that path. It's so nice to have someone who knows what
Mhm.
they're doing. They've only handled it a couple of times, and
Right.
especially because it is something that you need to check with your medical doctor, know if your body is ready to work this way, to have these different medicines put into your body, and there's a lot of things to consider.
Yeah, these are potent substances, and even
Yeah.
though they've been around for hundreds or thousands of years and have long indigenous roots, there could be very harmful interaction effects. So Like I said, it pays to do your homework, and any
Yes.
retreat center, internationally or US, any retreat center and any individual practitioner worth their salt will insist on having medical background information from you, make you complete an intake form, probably do an intake interview, and
Yes.
deny you if you are a health risk, because
Right. So
there are
that's
certainly multiple options for you if psychedelics isn't going to be the path.
right. And that's
Mhm.
one way to know is what questions are they asking you? How much are they looking into you and wanting to know about everything about you medically so that your best interest is at heart?
But exciting times, right?
It
No
is.
question.
It's super
Yeah.
exciting. It's amazing that it's taken so long. You and I were talking about that on the last podcast. I mean, truly in the 70s, I think all thought we were well on our way to getting to this point. And to
Mhm.
think it took until 2026 to get here, it's really just amazing.
Yeah. Better late than
Okay.
never.
It's better late than never. That's right. So when you look at why people are drawn to sacred medicines today, what do you think they're looking for?
I know many of them are looking for relief from suffering, relief
Mhm.
from pain, alleviation of long term suffering, because so many people drawn to this path have tried everything else and it isn't working for them. And by everything else, I mean largely every conventional path. So they've gone the route of accepted allopathic medicine, gone to an MD, maybe they've gone through conventional accepted mental health channels, therapy. They may have tried medication. They may be on medication. I've talked to people, and again, in my practice, I concentrate on really preparing people and educating them for a psychedelic or plant medicine experience
Mm.
and helping them get the most out of it through integration afterwards. But I've spoken to people who are on powerful antipsychotics or antidepressants who honestly, often, unless they can cycle off of that kind of medication, are not going to be candidates for this. Doesn't mean they're not good candidates for other modalities, but it's often a little heartbreaking for me to hear their stories because
Mhm.
they really want to feel better. They don't want to be surviving. They want to thrive. So,
Right.
in answer to your question, that's a lot of what brings people here. Now, there's also another population that is looking for a breakthrough. They're stuck, right? And they want to
Mhm.
be unstuck. They want to grow. And then I would say there's a third group that are just truly what we call psychonauts. They're psychedelic explorers. They're
Yeah.
curious. They're going to try, all sorts of new things. They're going to be the renegades and the pioneers, perhaps not just in psychedelics, but in many different modalities or walks of
Right.
life.
And I can
Yeah,
see how those overlap too, because I would
they can.
definitely think that, I would probably fit into group 2, but I didn't know about the breakthrough. I didn't know that there was gonna be a breakthrough. I just thought I don't know what I thought. I just, was like, "Yeah, let's look into this. Why not?" I've looked into everything else, kinda that what you were saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's been so much curiosity about it that if you're naturally an explorer, you have that personality type, of course
Mhm.
you're gonna be drawn to this. And that's what drew me to it. But I also
That's what I
got
was
the
gonna ask you.
breakthrough
What
or
about you?
breakthroughs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would not describe myself as a natural psychonaut. I am definitely more in camp 2 and have
Yeah.
learned to truly use this as medicine and as a
Mhm.
tool. But whether it's in a retreat setting, whether it's in a one-on-one session, whether it's in a small group local setting, all of those contexts are
Well,
can
and
can be effective.
that's what's so beautiful about it is that it
Mm.
has so many opportunities for so many people, and people go at it in different ways. Like on the retreat that I'm hosting in January, people will come uh, a lot like you and I did when we met like 20 years ago.
I feel like it was 2008, so we're going on like 18 years,
Okay, 18
if my
years.
math is right.
I think
Yeah.
you're correct. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Uh, And, people like, we went as solo people on that retreat, and then we met at retreat. We didn't come with any
Mhm.
friends. We didn't know anyone. We just, had heard of the teacher, the author that we both
Yes.
were in love with. So there's that way that people go on these type of experiences. And then there's the people that just do it as a completely solo retreat. They take themselves on
Mhm.
a vacation. I know you and I hate to call them a vacation because I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes it turns
Yeah.
into a vacation, but mostly it's for self-reflection, some time to, find yourself, of course. And I love really the thought of how psychedelics could help in that journey. But let's talk about solo retreating. It's something you and I
Yeah.
have both done. And give me, first of all, a bit of your perspective on the whole thing as a whole.
Yeah, the solo retreat. So just putting psychedelics to the side for a second. The solo retreat is when I'm gonna just kind of lay down a definition. You
Perfect.
are feeling the call or the need or the desire to go away by yourself for yourself. That is very different than going on a group retreat as a solo person, not bringing your friends or not knowing anyone. Now, when you and I met, I don't think you knew anyone from that group. I know I didn't.
No, no.
Yeah, we each showed up on a planned, structured group retreat, small
Yeah.
group retreat by ourselves. And there was a lot of, interactivity and immersion and connection. The solo retreat is you on your own. So to bring it back to psychedelics for a second, I would say you probably don't want a solo retreat with psychedelics unless you are very highly trained and experienced with this. I have done a mini solo retreat serving myself medicine that I had experience with. I put a lot of safety measures in place and so forth. But psychedelics is best experienced in a retreat environment when it is structured. Again, it's vetted, it's established.
Mhm.
But the solo retreat otherwise can be such a nourishing, beautiful reset. And I just recently did have that experience in March. What led up to it was a lot of life change. It was a very positive life change, but it was very concentrated over a period of a couple of months. Not
Mhm.
a lot of downtime, and finally hitting a wall of overwhelm where I wasn't sure if, some of the upshot of the changes I went through, which is moving in with a partner at that, deepening a intimate romantic relationship, moving from a small place to a much larger dwelling, sharing it not only with my partner, but with visitors, and still managing my life, right? Balancing a new environment and a new situation with keeping the other priorities in my life going,
And,
still working.
if I can
Hmm.
add, letting go of your past life or where you have been
Hmm.
living single for all these years, happily
Yeah.
single, having a great time exploring, everything I think I've ever known you wanting to explore. So, coming from a really great place, into this was, yeah, big change.
Yeah, and I may have touched on some of my background in our first episode, but I was, married and doing kind of the conventional married with kid, two career, family plan for 25 years. Got divorced, had 10 years totally on my own, not in any long term relationships. Like you said, traveling, exploring, answering to no one but myself. And I will say my daughter because she's important.
Yeah. We all answer
But
to our kids,
otherwise,
don't we?
yeah, I'm not gonna, like, abandon her, but,
No.
really just, like, having as much freedom as I had ever known to then, recommitting into a long-term relationship. And you bring up a really good point. Then how do you integrate all your past experience, right?
Right.
So I hit a wall of overwhelm at the end of February. I knew it in my body. I knew patterns were being activated. I was stressed. And what came, what did that trigger or what did that cause to arise? a feeling of wanting to escape,
Mhm.
lots of doubt and fear, right? Isn't that what always comes up? You know, when we're
Mhm.
dysregulated, when we're thrown off, when we've got a lot of life coming at us all at once, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, we can easily get dysregulated. And I knew it and I felt it in my body. And I felt those initial impulses to just either shut down or run or escape. And I'm like, all right, none of that's going to be healthy. That none of that's going to take me where I ultimately want to be. But I need something.
Mhm.
I need some space. I need some breathing room. I need some clarity of thought to get centered, to do some reflection and figure this out, to really sit with my feelings, in a safe, productive place to do so, rather than just, being constantly barraged by the fire hose going out at full blast. And so sometimes the only way you're going to get that space is to go somewhere else, right?
Yes, to step away. Yep.
Yep, physically step away, change your environment. So I thought about, before I did anything, I spoke with some very trusted friends and supports and processed some feelings and said, well, I'm thinking of going away somewhere, not running away, not moving out or doing
Yeah.
anything drastic. So, as tempting as it was to go somewhere familiar with people and places I knew well, I also knew I really needed intentional isolation. So I started looking at where can I go and plant myself in a retreat-like setting where I'm going to
Mhm.
be safe and not distracted and not go procrastinate or avoid what I came there to do. So I really did choose a place to that I had been to and I was somewhat familiar with, but where I wouldn't know anyone and I wouldn't be tempted to break away from the self introspection that I really wanted.
That's a perfect answer to the question I didn't ask you. But because I was wondering
Uh,
if you had thought of framing it as a retreat before you left or if that had come later. But I love how really you're saying that you needed in your mind, you knew that you needed to retreat. And that came to the conclusion, it sounds like to
yeah.
me, that that's how you decided, yes, needs to be a retreat type setting. I'm not going home to Chicago to visit family or, stuff like that. It's not that
Mhm.
I just need to get away. It's much more than that.
The answer to your question is yes. Before I left, I did decide I want what will amount to a self created retreat where I'm not going to go crazy here and try to put together some whole structured agenda itinerary for myself. I'm not going to make myself go like, do yoga at 8 to 9 a.m. every day and then have a
Right.
smoothie and then journal for 2 hours, because I could certainly go there.
Yeah.
I'm highly organized, but it was like, no, I need capacity. I need a place with space, flexibility, not a rigid agenda. And once I got there, I did prioritize the fact that I wanted to exercise. I wanted to move my body. I wanted to be outside, every day. I
Hmm.
wanted to rest, consciously rest every day. I wanted to meditate in the morning. I also wanted to actually get some work done because my life had become so full and chaotic that I was like cramming, work in here and there and feeling constantly behind. And I
Right. And
wanted
it
just
feels
not to
so
have to answer to
nice.
anyone else.
Yes, and
Yeah.
it feels so nice to do your work sometimes where you don't have the stress and the pressure and you can actually enjoy what you're doing, and
Yeah.
it seems like then the creativity really flows. It really comes
Mhm.
in and you're just so much happier with that end product.
And it reduces the stress because if you could focus enough to get something across the finish line or work on it a little longer than you
Yeah.
might normally, because I wanted to go somewhere where I didn't feel so time bound by either, um, answering to visitors or planning things, with my partner and having to stop at a certain time. And sure, that's part of life and that's
Yeah.
fine. But my schedule was literally being overrun by other people, and I let it happen. I had to look at
Mhm.
the fact that, I signed up for this. Where am I
Right.
failing at creating better boundaries for myself? Where am I saying yes to too many things? What's mine to own versus what is not mine to own? And in fact, one of the things that led to the overwhelm point, the boiling point that I reached was something that was beyond my control. And it's like, wow, okay, I didn't see this coming. I certainly don't want it to ever happen again. And how can, I take steps to communicate to my partner, to communicate to other people, and set better boundaries, both, as a couple and as an individual, so that that situation doesn't happen again.
Mm, mhm.
So which led to some incredibly productive, fruitful conversations that paid off immensely. So,
Like it
yeah.
always does. That is just so true. It really does. It opens up the door to everything that you're feeling, and you can express it in a way that maybe you didn't have the room or the space
Mm,
or the time before to put your thoughts all exactly together with your feelings. And that's what the retreat gives you is okay. And what I find, like when you're on those solo retreats, so you have the time, you're not bantering back and forth with someone except for yourself. So you're thinking,
yeah.
or it seems like those beautiful little creative drops will drop in, and it
Mhm.
gives you just a lot more insight than you would have had at home. Just even, making breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That can totally flatten your creativity.
Home can be a distracting environment, right? You do one
Yes.
thing and, like, all of a sudden something breaks. You have to make a call and, or
Yep.
the doorbell rings or whatever. So, part of what to look for in a solo retreat, and I'll give this some color context here, is a place where the distractions are minimized or non-existent. Now, I live in the mountains of Colorado. I've been here for 5 years. Before that, I was in the tropics. I was in Southeast Florida for close to 20 years, and I love the tropics. I was also married to a foreign national. My ex-husband is Mexican. Our daughter is bicultural, dual citizenship. I've spent a lot of time in Mexico. And so where I ended up going on my retreat is Riviera Maya, the
Mm,
area between Cancun and Tulum, and I know
mhm.
you and I are both familiar with that area.
Yes, my favorite.
And, part of my decision where to go was simply, affordability and availability. So,
Yeah.
the whole world was not my oyster by any stretch of the imagination. I didn't wanna, like, get on a flight to Europe or Asia or some crazy thing. I wanted easy to get to, affordable, available immediately. And I found a big resort that not an all-inclusive, but a big resort that had everything on site where I'm like, "This is great. I can
Yeah.
literally not leave this place and get all my needs met." And while there's a lot that it had to offer, I feel like I can also ignore or not be sucked in by some of, like, the entertainment style, what you could call options or distractions. And sure enough, that proved to be the case, which was just a blessing. But when I did wanna treat myself, there were, like, 12 restaurants, and there was a live, musical show, and so it was there if I wanted it, but it wasn't in my face where I couldn't get away from it.
Nice. And that's, when you're solo, that you can make those choices. Like if you're
Mhm.
traveling with your partner or your friend, then you say, "Hey, do you want to go to the show tonight that they're having?" And so you go, but then you're kind of stuck there. Like if you say you want to leave, it's like then talking that other person into leaving. So that's what's nice about traveling solo
Mhm.
is everything is up to you. Everything is changeable. It's
Yeah.
all how is you're feeling, and you don't have to deal with anything that doesn't match what you're needing.
100%. And you had a good question for me, which kinda speaks to this. What's the difference between relaxation and transformation? And maybe we can throw introspection in there. I think I did need some relaxation, but mostly what I needed was more capacity, more, like, personal space. There were times where I relaxed, I would go get like an hour of beach or pool time a day. And other times I would go walk for half an hour or an hour. Now I didn't go in necessarily seeking transformation or some sort of breakthrough, but I did go in consciously seeking time to reflect, to think,
Yes.
to look back on my journey over the last 5 years, 10 years, like different increments,
Yeah.
to look
Yeah.
back on my decisions and get to a place of, okay, am I confident in my decisions? Is there anything I would change? Am I making conscious decisions? And most of the answers were really positive. But here's something I didn't expect to happen, because you might have asked me about that too, like what were my expectations or what surprised me.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
I When I got back to Mexico, and it was the first time I have been back to the country in about a decade, I realized there is an aspect of who I am. It's not just personality, but part of my lived experience. A huge part of it was becoming familiar with and really falling in love with that country and that culture and
Mhm.
immersing and integrating into that culture. I had a huge, extended in-law family. I'm still in touch with many of them. And what I learned is that like Mexican Karen, it still exists, and she doesn't need to be married to somebody for me to embrace that part of me and recognize that. And how that came about was when I was down there, I didn't I consciously didn't go try to meet people. Here's another thing about, are you going to go distract yourself and just
Right.
turn it into a vacation, or are you really going to
Right.
spend the time with yourself? I met one or two people, I had one or two casual conversations, but mostly I was communicating with the employees on the resort
Mhm.
who are Mexicans. And while a vast majority of them spoke English or pretty passable English, I used my Spanish, and I kind of missed having done that. And to
Mm.
my surprise and delight, many of them said in Spanish, wow, you speak really good Spanish. How do you speak Spanish? And
Oh.
I'm like, and I would look back at them and say, really? Really?
Yeah.
Like, are you sure? You're not just
Yeah.
like looking for a tip or whatever, but
Right.
and they're like, "No, really?" And, I tell them a little of why, but, I was able to just reclaim this part of myself that I'd sort of put to the side or forgotten about or lost, and come to the realization that I don't need anyone's permission to have that part. And no, I have no Mexican or Hispanic lineage. I have no genetic makeup. I joke that, I was Mexicanized in a way.
Me too. No.
Um, but it was another culture that I embraced for a very long time, and
Right.
I don't want to let that go. It developed an aspect or side of myself that I was surprised to rediscover and happy to.
No kidding. I can imagine because, yeah, that's kind of something in a way you gave away. Like, "Oh, I'm only Mexican
Yeah.
Karen with these people," and it's like, "Wait a
Right.
minute. No, I have always been Mexican Karen," because I love this place so much. I love the culture, I love the
Mhm.
language, all of those things, so you got to reclaim that, and that's really awesome. I love that.
And I think we might all have something like that,
Yeah,
For me, it was something about that culture. And certainly, my former in-laws, they're a fantastic family. And,
yeah.
my daughter was just down there with her cousins and hanging out. There's still a lot of connection. But something really touched my heart and soul, and that doesn't go away. The players might change, people might change, where you're living might change, but whatever that might be for you or for anyone listening, that is something to integrate. So I was surprised that there was this integration happening, and I came back feeling more whole and really more in touch with, who I am, who I've been, but also who I want to be going forward.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining us this week on part one. We will continue this conversation next week where we get deeper into solo retreating. Until then, have a beautiful week. Bye-bye.
I love you, Gaga.